It was a moonless night, and the road stretched ahead like a dark, endless ribbon. My name is Max, a 32-year-old sales executive who often drives long distances for work. Tonight, I was on my way back from a business trip, driving along a remote highway that cut through dense forests and empty fields. Clock on the dashboard glowed a faint 1 a.m. The world outside was still, with only the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind and the rhythmic hum of my car's engine for company. I had been driving for hours, my eyes growing heavy with fatigue. The road was deserted, not a single car in sight, and the eerie silence was only broken by the crunch of gravel under my tires. I turned up the radio to keep myself awake, but all I could find was static. Frustrated, I turned it off, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the gentle rumble of the car. The headlights pierced through the darkness, casting long, wavering shadows on the asphalt. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, their gnarled branches forming twisted shapes that played tricks on my tired mind. I tried to focus on the road, but a sense of unease was slowly creeping in. There was something unnatural about the night, a heaviness in the air that made my skin prickle. About half an hour later, as I rounded a sharp curve, I saw a figure standing by the side of the road. A man, silhouetted against the darkness, with one arm extended and his thumb pointing upwards. A hitchhiker. I instinctively slowed down, my headlights revealing a pale, gaunt face with sunken eyes and tattered clothes. He looked desperate, like he had been stranded for a long time. Normally, I wouldn't pick up strangers, especially not in the dead of night on a deserted road, but something about his gaze made me pause. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe the idea of leaving someone alone in such a desolate place felt wrong. I rolled down my window slightly and asked, "Need a ride?" The man nodded silently, his expression unreadable. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door, and he slid in without a word. He smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic that I couldn't quite place. He didn't speak, just stared straight ahead, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I tried to shrug it off as nerves. As I drove, the man remained silent, not even glancing my way. I attempted to make small talk, but he only responded with curt nods or monosyllables. The uncomfortable silence stretched on, punctuated only by the occasional sigh or the shuffle of his feet against the car mat. We drove for another 20 minutes in silence, the tension in the car thickening with each passing mile. I couldn't help but steal glances at him. There was something off about his presence, something unsettling that I couldn't put my finger on. His face was expressionless, but his eyes, they were dark and empty, like staring into a void. Suddenly, the car radio turned on by itself, blaring static at full volume. I jumped, startled, and quickly reached to turn it off. As I did, I noticed the man staring at the radio, his eyes wide and unblinking. A chill ran through me. I hadn't seen him move before that moment. His expression was unnerving, as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I tried to focus on driving, but my hands were trembling slightly. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. For a split second, I thought I saw another face staring back at me from the back seat. Face twisted in anguish, eyes hollow, and mouth open in a silent scream. I whipped around, but there was no one there. Just the empty back seat, shadows playing tricks on my tired mind. I forced a laugh, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion. The hitchhiker said nothing, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white, and pressed the accelerator a little harder, eager to put some distance between us and whatever I thought I had seen. The road seemed endless, each stretch of asphalt identical to the last. I checked the GPS, but the screen was blank, the device flickering as if struggling to maintain a signal. I cursed under my breath and tried to reset it, but it remained unresponsive. "Do you know how far the next town is?" I asked, hoping to break the silence. The hitchhiker finally turned to me, his gaze piercing. "There is no next town," he said, his voice raspy and low, as if unused for years. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I looked at him, but he had already turned away, staring blankly out the window. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. The trees outside seemed to shift, their branches swaying unnaturally, as if whispering secrets to one another. The headlights flickered for a brief moment, plunging us into darkness before flickering back on. My heart raced, and I tried to steady my breathing. I glanced at the hitchhiker again. It was still. The air in the car felt heavier, the atmosphere thick, with an unspoken tension. I pressed on, hoping the miles would eventually lead somewhere familiar, but the road kept stretching endlessly, winding through the night like a serpent. Just as I was about to ask the man more questions, the car began to sputter. The engine choked, and the car slowed to a crawl before coming to a complete stop. I cursed, slamming my fists on the steering wheel in frustration. The fuel gauge showed that I still had half a tank left. This shouldn't be happening. I turned to the hitchhiker, intending to ask for help, but my breath caught in my throat. He was gone. The passenger seat was empty, the door locked and untouched. I looked around frantically, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. My heart pounded in my chest, and sweat dripped down my forehead despite the cool night air. I stepped out of the car, scanning the area with my phone's flashlight. Beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and the empty road. No footprints, no sign of life, just an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow all sound. Panic set in. I rushed back into the car, locking the doors and gripping the steering wheel as if it could somehow anchor me back to reality. The GPS blinked to life suddenly, the screen glitching before displaying a single message: turn back. I shifted the car into gear, the engine roaring to life as if nothing had happened. I spun the car around and drove back the way I came, not daring to look back. My mind raced with questions. Who was that man? What had I seen? But I didn't care to find the answers. All I wanted was to escape, to leave that cursed road behind. I finally reached a familiar intersection, the lights of a small gas station glowing in the distance. I pulled in, my hands still shaking, and parked the car. The attendant gave me a curious look as I stumbled out, asking if I was all right. I picked up a hitchhiker, I said, my voice unsteady. He just disappeared. The attendant's expression changed, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. You're not the first, he said quietly. People have seen him on that road for years. They say he's searching for something he lost, something he can't let go of. I nodded numbly, too exhausted to process it all. I refueled the car and sat in the parking lot for a while, letting the noise of the station bring me back to reality. When I finally drove away, I took a different route, steering clear of the dark, lonely road that had nearly swallowed me whole. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hitchhiker was still out there, wandering the endless road, waiting for his next ride. I only hoped I'd never cross paths with him again.